Coaches and their methods of coaching are crucial in an individual or team athlete's success. Oftentimes, coaches were athletes themselves in their past years, which greatly helps them gain the most effective methods of coaching. A good coach is tough on his or her team and pushes their athlete beyond their limits to yield the best results. The most successful teams have some of the most toughest coaches in training. However, there is a fine line where the coach can take training too far, causing it to become abusive. Hillary Dole was an incoming freshman at Cornell University on the softball team. One Friday, the freshmen participated in an annual tradition where the recruits would blindfold themselves and line up on the field. The coaches then yelled at all of them to run, and through the confusion, Dole sprinted 40 yards through chaos into a brick wall, resulting into a broken nose, bloody face, and fractured teeth. She also suffered a concussion. However, her coach is still requiring her to play in the next softball game a few days later. This is an obvious example of coaching that crosses a line. Her coaches were not intentionally abusive to her in a way that many other coaches are, including body shaming, name calling, and much worse. However, they still made poor decisions by enforcing this ritual on recruits and still forcing her to play in next week's game through the pain. It is hard to imagine that Dole played well through the pain, so it is clear that coaching affects their athlete's success to some degree. This information, however, leads to the question, how exactly does coaching affect an athlete's success? After examining events, especially through women's professional sports, it is clear that positive coaching promotes success through encouragement, while negative coaching restricts success through mental and physical abuse. A large portion of abusive coaching occurs in women's U.S. gymnastics. According to the article, Empowering Women Through Sport, written by Executive Director of UN Women, Famzile Nguka, in some instances, complicity and cover-ups have led to decades of abuse that affected hundreds of women, as was the case with USA Gymnastics, where young female athletes were sexually assaulted by gym owners, coaches, and staff working for gymnastics programs. These instances being spoken about specifically include crimes committed by U.S. women's gymnastics doctor Larry Nassar, who ultimately made the public aware that sexual assault is an issue in female sports. Nassar was reported of taking pictures of athletes and patients, and by the time he was sentenced, it revealed that he abused over 500 girls and had over 37,000 images taken of patients during appointments. And it was later found that he sexually assaulted 4 girls, adjusting his sentence to 165 years to life. 4 out of the 5 members of the Fierce Five, which was the group of young teenage gymnasts that were only 18 years old competing in the 2012 Olympics, with Gabby Douglas among that group, also reported being abused by Nassar. Many could be oblivious to the fact this tragedy is even occurring because of how well they performed in the 2012 Olympics when they all took home gold medals. However, this still does not justify this abuse, and it is surprising how well they performed through this mistreatment. These gymnasts could have been more successful without this abuse, and more importantly, retire from their sport with a love and passion from gymnastics. However, many retired with deprived and helpless feelings. The mental and physical abuse these female athletes endured is a substantial factor in the way that they view their sport. This change negatively affects their performance because in order to perform one's best, they must want to do the best they can and be the best they can be. This is very difficult to do once being abused, especially sexually assaulted, and it is very hard to imagine having a passion for a sport such as gymnastics once this has occurred. After their traumatic experiences, it is easy to lose motivation and drive to succeed because of the disturbing events they have now linked to this sport, which ultimately causes their performance to suffer greatly. Positive coaching, however, has the opposite effect. Motivation and drive come easier when supported with encouragement. Interpersonal relationship psychologist Sophia Jowett wrote an article over the true effect that sports leadership has on success. In her article, she states, relationships that are supportive, caring, satisfying, and purposeful are more likely to become a vehicle to creativity and resourcefulness, both of which are necessary ingredients for performance success at the highest level of sport. Accordingly, when coaches provide encouragement and agreeable behavior, their athletes' success will grow exponentially. When athletes have a healthy and pleasant relationship with their coaches, it gives them more motivation to succeed because once they show progress and achievement, it not only makes themselves proud, but it also gives them someone else to be proud of them as well, which increases their drive and passion for the sport greatly. And many could argue that the only way to grow better as an athlete and persevere through the highs and lows that come with playing a sport is to have a very tough coach. This is true to a degree because workouts and training are not meant to be easy, and their coaches must be strong enough to push them through these highs and lows to make them better as an athlete. However, once a coach crosses this line and becomes too strict, success is limited. Because of the obvious differences in performance coincided with coaching, it is clear that more positive coaching must occur. The question, however, is how to execute this and implement it into all coaches' coaching regimens. Options for this include providing training and education for coaches, and even having school supervision examine their attitude while coaching and alter it if needed and decided. Providing training for all coaches and trainers would be beneficial for athletes because coaches can learn in depth how to properly push their students to become better while encouraging them through the highs and lows of training. One location for this type of education is at Ohio University. This program specializes in developing interscholastic athletic directors. Directors from this program state, "You will build on your passion for serving young student athletes and learn to run an efficient and highly successful athletic department." This tool could be useful for new young coaches just beginning their role as a coach, and even for coaches that are struggling to promote passion and success in their athletes. The second option, which is having schools examine the coaches and trainers' attitudes and coaching strategies, would also be very beneficial because it allows school authorities to be aware of any misconduct that could be occurring during practice, games, or any other school events. It provides an opportunity for poor coaching to be observed, adjusted, and fixed as well. However, both of these solutions have limitations. Coach training would cost money and would be very expensive for sports coaches and trainers to participate in. Because of the economic uncertainties with this solution, availability of these programs could be a struggle. The second solution would also provide limitations because it does not guarantee improvement. School supervision will not always be 100% beneficial because if the school has already unnoticed abusive behavior, it is likely that more abusive behavior will likely to go unnoticed. The solution, however, is much more accessible and cheap, which calls for at least effort in implementing the solution throughout schools. Because of the limitations in each proposed solution, a combination of both options would arise the best results in students since coach training proposes weak areas in cost and availability, while coach supervision strengthens availability with the low cost. And while that solution may not guarantee success as strongly as the other, a 50-50% combination of both options will yield the most achievement in athletes who can develop a love for their sport as well.
Okay. My first question for you, how did your research question evolve as you moved through the research process?
So, in the beginning, I wanted to focus solely on gymnastics and the abuse that they endured after looking through the stimulus material about empowering women through sport, because they talked briefly about that, and I was super interested in that. But then I discovered that this is an issue throughout all of women's sports and not gymnastics, and I thought that would be worthy of how detrimental it is to women in these professional sports.
Okay, good. What are the implications of your findings to your community, like your school and your city? What are the implications?
The implications would be just about how it can so easily go unnoticed, like in Gabby Douglas in the Fierce Fives case. They did not discover Nassar's abuse until well after they competed in the 2012 Olympics, and they could have performed so much better without that abuse and just not have to go through that horrible tragedy. And so it's scary about how that could be occurring in our society today, all around us, that this abuse could be occurring, and we're not aware of it until after it already occurs.
Okay, I'm going to ask it again. What are the implications, like of your solution, to your community? How would it play out in your community at All Saints?
So implications of putting this solution in to effect, it would definitely cost money, and which is something that we would have to think about. It would also entail for supervision, like the head of school, to come to many practices and observe and watch over us to make sure that the coaches are performing well, and it would maybe take some uncomfortable conversations to make sure that